I hope you're seeing a cheerleader.
I,
Barbara
yeah,
Lee.
Who
it's
is
Barbara
she?
Lee. It's Barbara Lee, isn't it?
It's Barbara Lee.
Yeah, everybody got it. Um, Congratulations. Um, all right, this has been one of those weeks. I thought this is the week where I can catch up on all the stuff I haven't finished, but by God, there's always something new, and this was action-packed. So I'm gonna deal with that. Then we'll finish up a little bit on the LA protests. If we're lucky, we'll get Mike's book review that's been waiting patiently. And we probably won't reach American history, but who knows? Um, all right. So, how do we categorize Donald Trump's foreign policy? He's not an internationalist, the policy that's guided America in our lives. He's not an isolationist either, is he? This week's proved that. And much to the disappointment of the non-interventionist restrainer wing of the party, uh, he got involved in Israel versus Iran. And who are those restrainers? Steve Bannon, Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson. So far, they've prevailed in Ukraine, and J.D. Vance counts himself among them, at least as it applies to Ukraine. Um, but all of a sudden, they lost out. So Tulsi Gabbard and J.D. Vance, they have a Hindu bond. Tucker Carlton, I'm sorry, J.D. Vance's wife, our second lady. They've already visited India, as did Tulsi Gabbard. And I just kind of got pulled into the Tulsi Gabbard rabbit hole, so bear with me. She identifies herself as a child of the Pacific, and it's true. Her father was a Samoan American, so she has the claim to being the first Samoan American Congresswoman. But she's also Hindu. Um, and there she is visiting Modi. Um, if J.D. Vance had any qualms about America getting involved in the Middle East, uh, uh, Trump made sure that he was standing behind him when he made his announcement. Um, Hegseth and Marco Rubio, there's no question about. They're on board. The interesting thing is Tulsi Gabbard freelanced and did a video that she released on social media speaking out against the danger of nuclear warfare and that we should not take any risks. And all this was while Israel and Iran were going at it, and before we got involved. It was very, very strange. And she had previously said that in her position in the intelligence community that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. But then after the strikes, she quickly revised that. So she's in a bit of a loop there. But she's out of the loop. But now she's back in. Just yesterday, she was included in the Situation Room where she had been excluded. And maybe that's to keep her from releasing any more freelance videos. Um, she's an interesting contrast. She served in the National Guard for over a decade, and including serving in Iraq for over a year. On the other hand, being from Hawaii, she was part of ending the federal Marijuana Prohibition Act, or she supports ending it. Um, Her father gave her a Hindu name. Tulsi means incomparable one. Her mother, by the way, was born in Indiana, not quite as exotic. But you could see her father is mixed Samoan European. He moved to Hawaii, where Tulsi grew up, and her parents started out owning a vegetarian restaurant in keeping with Hindu vegetarianism. Her father evolved and became a Hawaiian state senator, and we have friends that live in Hawaii. The husband is a political operative, and so he clued us in early on that her father was quite conservative when it came to same-sex marriage. And now he's, in addition to being Hindu, he runs with socially conservative Catholics. Tulsi grew up surfing, got into martial arts, yoga. She was homeschooled, but then sent for a couple of years to the Philippines to a girls' finishing school. So she grew up with the Hindu spiritual practice, and as a teenager, she declared herself a Hindu. So she has an interesting, and maybe it's because of her involvement with our misadventure in Iraq in 2003. She's quite dovish, and thought Obama should keep his hands off of the Syrian civil war, which of course he did, and got him some criticism for drawing a red line, and then when Assad crossed it, he didn't take any action. So she's a director of intelligence now, and that's based actually on some of her experience when she was in Congress. She's not new to this. Also, interestingly, she was a Democrat and served on the DNC for 3 years. When Bernie Sanders announced that he was running, she resigned and endorsed him, which got her into a spat with Hillary. And in 2020, she launched her own presidential campaign along beside Kamala Harris. And she was more of a populist, anti-interventionist. And she has always been a lightning rod, inviting criticism. And during this race, people suspected she was just running as a third party spoiler to help reelect Trump. But when she dropped out. She endorsed Biden. Endorsed Biden. So the controversial thing was her 1 week fact-finding trip to Syria and Lebanon. That was in 2017 while she was a congresswoman. And when she was there, she had 2 unplanned meetings face to face with Assad. And when she was criticized for that, she said she wasn't going to apologize for trying to prevent um, uh, young people from getting involved and in harm's way in the military. And I think she felt that's what happened to her in 2003 in Iraq. Um, and she denounced the forever wars, especially when you go in and try to do regime change. And so she said, if I have to meet with a dictator to prevent war, I'll do it. Um, so after she left Congress, she started taking more conservative positions. So, like her father, she was lukewarm on gay marriage and was out front in opposing transgender rights. Um, and she spoke to the very conservative CPAC conference and officially left when she did that, she was definitely out of the Democrat Party. And she wound up endorsing Trump. And here's Tucker Carlson off to the side, a fellow dove. So he and Tulsi were well-known doves that don't want the America to get involved, and that's the way that MAGA's been talking. Why should we get involved? Make America great again. And interestingly enough, in our history, that was George Washington's position. Remember, he said, "Don't get involved in European wars," when he finally left the presidency. Um, so she got nominated by Trump to pay her back for her endorsement to join the cabinet in the intelligence community. And she took a lot of heat, and she summed it up. Some accuse me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet. This is absurd. I have 5 different puppet masters. This is a part of her being a lightning rod. So who else is in this restrainer camp? Um, there's this guy, I kept running into his name, Elbridge Colby, and he's an undersecretary of defense. And he's consistently been in Trump's circle. He held a similar position in the first Trump administration, and he's famous for focusing on China. That's the primary threat, and anything we do in the Middle East or in Europe is diluting where we should be putting our strength. And that's not so strange. That was Obama's pivot. We forget. But Obama pivoted to the Pacific, the Indo-Pacific. And he's particularly concerned about Taiwan. Um, uh, so on the other side, you have the pro-Israel faction. Um, and there are 2 camps, the strategists and the religious-based support. Let's do the strategists first. Israel has been for the last month in a unique position. We've talked about the so-called axis of resistance that Iran thought would protect it. from any problems with Israel or the West. They had surrogates in Iraq itself, because you'll remember Iraq is 60% Shia. And when we went in and liberated Iraq from the Sunnis, that just strengthened Iran. And the Syria was ruled by an offshoot of Sunnis, and they also controlled Lebanon through this Hezbollah uh, uh, militancy. And they held Israel always under threat. They had rockets supplied by Iran, situated all throughout Lebanon, ready to rain down on Israel at the slightest provocation. And when the Hamas led its terrible attack in Gaza, they declared their support for Hamas. And all of a sudden, Israel's fighting a true front war, their worst nightmare. And then, of course, you have at the bottom here Iran supplying the Houthis, who are harassing shipping in the Red Sea. So that was their axis of resistance. But one by one, they've fallen away. Israel has neutered Hamas in Gaza. They famously bugged all the Hezbollah cell phones and removed their leadership, also with sophisticated, well researched attacks on the leaders, Nasrallah in particular, who's been there and running Hezbollah for decades. Syria has fallen, ignored by their Russian supporters, who have their own problems now in Ukraine. And so the supporters of the Hawks thought this was the right call at the right time. And here's Trump. It's interesting. He's wearing a red MAGA hat in the security room. I bet he got called in the middle of the night and he was having a bad hair day. So he slapped on his hat. And we got to remember, just looking at the world from Israel's point of view, that Hamas attack killed more Jews than any day since the Holocaust. And when Hezbollah piled on, that just made it worse. It's interesting, after Israel has taken out Hezbollah's leadership, they're now abstaining. They're not doing anything in this current conflict. And Assad's not around anymore to help out. So it's a new ball game. As I was researching the axis of resistance, I stumbled upon this division, which it turns out is made up of Afghani Shia. And we're familiar with Afghani Shia if we've read The Kite Runner. That dealt with the Hazara. And they have had to flee from Afghanistan, obviously, uh, under a tight Sunni control. And in Iran, they were recruited from the refugee and migrant community to form a division to go and assist Assad in Syria. But they've been neutered. So the weakening of the axis of resistance. So in the middle of this, uh, Iran, realizing that they were no longer had the shield of their axis of resistance, uh, decided to go all in. According to intelligence, I'm not talking about what I know directly, but they decided that it was time to break out and see if they could weaponize a nuclear stockpile. And the IAEA came out with a report a few days before Israel launched its strike that tended to support that. Now, since the strike, they've been madly backpedaling because they don't want to be perceived as endorsing Israel's aggression, but they did notice, and they have inspectors on the ground, that there was unusual activity. But when Israel couldn't destroy Fordo, which is too deep for the weapons that they had at hand, they were getting desperate, and the intelligence community was, hey, this could really get out of hand. There's a downward spiral, and if Israel feels desperate enough, they may assassinate the Ayatollah himself. And there was talk about that. And Trump even teased, we know where he is. We could take him out. We don't want to take him out, but maybe we will. And typical Trump fashion. And I think that spooked everybody that we got to stop this downward spiral, especially if Israel gets overwhelmed with the ballistic missiles. They don't have an infinite supply for their Iron Dome. And if they run out of defensive weapons, and who knows how big their stockpile is, they could really be hurt badly. So that's what went into Trump's decision to eliminate the cause of the conflict, Fordo, and break the downward spiral, and hope that Iran would make a rational decision. So, who are the key hawkish figures, not religious? So, John Bolton, of course, Trump fired him because he fires everybody, but he was the chief hawk. And later on, when we talk about what Trump is, I'm going to argue that he's a sovereigntist. And John Bolton has been a consistent sovereigntist for decades. And I'll define sovereigntism soon. Also, of course, being head of the CIA, you would put a hawk, and most generals are hawks, but we know not all of them are from the first Trump administration. Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, and sometimes J.D. Vance. It's funny. He's one of these flexible guys and we'll remember he was flexible when it came to supporting Trump. So he's an opportunist. for sure. When Trump first declared in 2016, he said Trump reminded him of Hitler. Um, so the other thing about these two guys is behind the scenes, they're jockeying to succeed Trump, and it's kind of out in the open. Um, and so Rubio the hawk versus J.D. Vance, the more moderate, it's an interesting contrast. The stakes are high between them. And then last weekend, Hegseth and J.D. Vance said that there wasn't going to be regime change. But of course, by the end of the day, Trump is typing away on and asking, why wouldn't there be regime change? Make Iran great again, MAGA. So who knows what's going to happen? But he has pulled off this truce. There were some difficulties early on, as might be expected in starting a truce. But as of 12 o'clock, everything seemed to be okay. I don't know. Does anybody have any other updates? And then let's separate now. Those are the strategic thinkers. Let's talk about Israel's religious supporters, and obviously the American Jewish community has some supporters, not all, but some. But interestingly, Christian supporters. So the key Jewish supporters were son-in-law Jared, and he was the one that gets the credit for the Abraham Accords. So Semitic, the Semites, the Arabs, and the Jews, also Semites, they historically, looking over the millennia, are not so friendly with the Persians. The Persians have always been held with suspicion. First, there was Cyrus and all the great Persian rulers who conquered Semitic territories. But even after the Arabs took over with Islam, the Persians were converted to Islam, but then they had their own Shia brand, and that's created tension. So the Abraham Accords were a natural coming together of the Semitic tribes. And this guy, David Friedman, was the ambassador to Israel in Trump's first term, and he got credit for moving the embassy to Jerusalem, which was a provocative thing to do in the midst of negotiations and any talk of a two-state solution. And we're hearing less and less about the two-state solution. So the other group of religious people were the Christians, specifically the evangelicals. And this is interesting. We studied the early days of the evangelicals on the frontier, and the reliance on itinerant preachers who came up with their own theories. But we're going to see that Christian support for Israel goes beyond the evangelicals. But part of the evangelical belief system is the second coming will come after end times and after the Jews return to the Holy Land. So if I'm misspeaking, please speak up and interrupt me. But this argues that because of this biblical prophecy, there's a moral imperative to support Israel. And there are prominent evangelical people that advise Trump. And is he doing it because he believes in end times? No, he's doing it because that they're 20% of the electorate, and that's the swing vote for him. If you look election after election, yeah, Bob.
Well, I thought if I would just quickly add that in the uh, debate or just interview last week by Tucker Carlson of Ted Cruz got himself in a real pretzel shape when he said that his faith requires him to support Israel because it says so in the Bible that if you support Israel, you will be blessed. And if you go against Israel, you will be cursed. Tucker Carlson was quickly able to respond, well, where is that in the Bible? And Ted Cruz had no idea. And what do you mean by nation of Israel? And in fact, Carlson was spot on because Ted Cruz was trying to quote something from Genesis, the first book of the Pentateuch. And it's in chapter, well, it's in 12:6 or 12:3, where God says to Abraham, you will create a nation that will be blessed. So the words Israel, Jew, etc., state were not in there. And yet Ted Cruz, along with many other American, I think he's an evangelical, his father was a pastor, lay claim to this passage that you must support the modern state of Israel to be blessed. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Ah, interesting. David.
Well, just, from the Jewish perspective, the Messiah hasn't come yet. So a lot of Orthodox Jews don't believe in the right of Israel to exist until the Messiah is there and leads people back. So this whole second coming, I mean, if you go to Isaiah, spears into pruning hooks and spears into plowshares. I mean, that whole thing doesn't fit with the Messianic era of Jews. And in fact, the Jewish, end times are filled with pillars of smoke and fire, which some people thought was, what happened when we invaded Kuwait, and there were these huge plumes of smoke and fire. So it may be end times, but from the Jewish perspective, that's the time the Messiah comes.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So actually, I have a lot more to say when we get to Mike Huckabee about this. But yeah, we are talking about the Christian view of the second coming. Interestingly, it's stronger of a feeling to protect the state of Israel. There's more urgency in the Christian community since they believe that the Messiah has already been here. Anyway, interesting. So some of these Christian organizations are quite extreme. So I mentioned one earlier. This one it is often beyond the pale. This guy Hagee, and he believes that it's America's God-given role to protect Israel. And this is not dissimilar to what we're talking about with manifest destiny. And I'm going to ask later, we think of manifest destiny as being our Western frontier, and then ultimately the era of imperialism. But I think the question is, does that include Israel? And in a way, well, I'll try to answer that question later on. Yeah, so this guy Hagee, um, here he is with Mike Pence. He's come out very strongly against gay marriage and gays adopting. Um, he's even made what some can be considered anti-Semitic, even though he's pro-Israel. So he writes that the Antichrist is going to be a half-Jewish homosexual. So he's a bad dude. And he snuggled up to Pence, who is an evangelical, and why, no doubt, Trump picked him to be vice president to keep that 20% of the electorate on side. So Mike Huckabee, he is a Christian Zionist. And he believes current events are fulfilling biblical prophecy that's going to lead directly to the rapture and Armageddon. And he explicitly says that the establishment or reestablishment of Israel in 1948 confirms God's plan. And he says it's a privilege to live in the end of the end times. Um, uh, I'm not sure we all want to join him. And he talks quite militantly about the removal of Palestinians from what he calls Judea and Samaria. I remember Menachem Begin insisted on using those terms instead of the West Bank. And he thinks all this is a strong Israel is going to help usher in the second coming. The first coming in the Christian belief has already happened. And that will push the apocalypse forward, and those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. Pretty strong stuff. So guess who the ambassador to Israel is? It's Mike Huckabee. We remember him from minor political campaigns that he ran. But being able to control the evangelical 20% swing vote has put him in a very strong position. So he is our ambassador with these beliefs, dismissing the Palestinian community, a two-state solution, forget about it. And all this is to prophesy the end times, to hasten the divine plan. And the Palestinians are just a political tool being misused to force the land away from Israel. And actually, there's no such thing as a Palestinian. There's no such thing as a West Bank. There's no such thing as a settlement. And by the way, there's no such thing as an occupation. So pretty strong stuff. In summary, the evangelicals are providing a political and moral cover for a very aggressive policy of the state of Israel and of the American support for that. And Biden tried to moderate the Israeli policy to the post-war Gaza. We can call it post-war because I don't think there's a militant threat now, but I could be wrong about that. Um, and they political power and the moral justification that the Christian right uses that gives the cover of, hey, this is morally righteous and necessary, and it makes it harder for more cautious voices in Trump's circle to speak out. And maybe that's Tulsi Gabbard, and maybe it's actually somebody at the Pentagon that might have a hard time advocating restraint. So if Trump's not an isolation and he's not an internationalist, so he's a sovereigntist, then what's that? So the term was born 100 years ago when America refused to join the League of Nations. So a sovereigntist is just my country, right or wrong. I'm not diluting my freedom of action one bit. Um, and the question is Trump's support for Israel, is that tip his hand on his general policy for dealing with problems in the world? Will he use American military might in other situations? Or is it just for Israel's biblical, not Israel's, the biblical claims of the swing vote that supports him? And the question is, will he use his military might in a place like Taiwan where the biblical injunctions are not at play? Yeah, Bob.
Well, this is possibly tongue in cheek, but 9 days ago, he had a rather tepid historical military parade in Washington, which by all accounts, he was not very inspired. And it struck me that he came away from that saying, I'm going to show you guys what a military parade looks like. Just watch me. And that may have been possibly, I'm tongue in cheek, some inspiration for saying, yes, let's go.
Yeah. The other, in a similar vein, Bob, you know, this nickname Taco, Trump always chickens out. He could have puffed up his chest and said, I'll fix them, because we all suspect everything with him is performance. And so who knows? And who knows what's going to happen next? So sovereigntism was born at a time of the great shuffling of the geopolitics of the world. Imagine four empires collapse in less than a decade, creating all these states. And the temptation was, let's see, since we don't have empires anymore to hold a civilization together, let's see if we can create a form of supranational government, the League of Nations. And so we had this big debate back 100 years ago between the sovereigntists and the globalists that were looking to establish some rules of global trade and migration and the movement of peoples. And this is what we had after World War II, but we didn't get it after World War I, which may be why we got World War II. But self-determination and international law and a subdued nationalism would have to wait until the end of World War II, when we were going to be as the strongest economy in the world, which we were then at the end of World War I. Germany had been taken down a notch, and British they were having a hard time maintaining their empire. We were the leader of the pack. And of course, we did all these things at the end of World War II, but not World War I. So, because we were sovereigntists, and we overcame that sovereigntism at the end of World War II, because we saw what a world without a leader could do. So, uh, uh, that's uh, the new nationalist movements blossomed, and nationalism in Europe became quite right wing and expansionist and led to World War II. Um, uh, so, who was it that blocked us from joining the League of Nations? It was veterans groups. It was the Protestant fundamentalists before Israel. And they were gonna, they were afraid that the Constitution would be taken over by a world government and overridden. So this was where we can talk sovereigntists as being the champions of America's exceptionalism. And there was a racial and religious element to it. They weren't going to be run and answer to and change their behavior for any people that weren't like us. And so this was a real Anglo-Saxon type of reaction. So sovereigntists, an example is Ukraine. Trump was willing to get involved, but only if we get a favorable deal on Ukrainian minerals. So sovereigntism is transactional. And you can say to have such chutzpah, you have to have an ideology, something like manifest destiny, which is just expansionism for the purpose of greed, for building up your own ego. So there's nothing noble about sovereigntism that I can find. And here we are, the American Indian in retreat and progress. We've seen this many times. And so the question is, does our frontier include Israel? And just bear in mind, Truman was a Baptist. And when you read the history of the early days of the United Nations, Israel really hung in the balance. What was going to happen with this trust territory that the British could no longer hold in check? And Truman was confronted: should it be a state, or should it be a home, as the Balfour Doctrine said, a home with the careful attention to the people that were already living there, the Palestinians, Mike Huckabee notwithstanding. And Huckabee would say, as a Christian Zionist, that Israel is part of the American frontier. And so, again, it's the electorate. And of the evangelicals, 80% believe that the 1948 founding of Israel was a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. So that's pretty strong stuff. And Trump probably doesn't believe that, although he's got a Jewish son-in-law. But these are the swing voters for him. So I thought I would look at other civilizations and other countries. This didn't start in America, this Zionism. Actually, you can look back at the Reformation and the Puritans in England in the 1650s. And they saw the Jews as a people chosen by God who eventually would return to their homeland. So it's not a Genesis in America. It was the Puritans brought it with them from England. But the scripture, and maybe David, you can help us on this. There were two quotes I found. I thought I'd run them down. Isaiah 11:12, the gathering of Israel and Judah. God will raise a banner for the nations and assemble the dispersed of his people from all corners of the earth. And you'll remember that there was a diaspora in 70 AD and the burning of the temple by the Romans. That was the beginning of the diaspora. And then, of course, you had an earlier diaspora to Babylon, and that's what Ezekiel 37 is referring to as well. Restoration of the nation of Israel, the valley of dry bones, and there. Ezekiel's to go and there, with God's help, the dry bones will be infused with breath, becoming a vast army. God promising to bring his people back to their land. So those two Jewish Old Testament allusions. And then on the Christian side, Oliver Cromwell supported readmitting Jews to England. Jews had been there for a long time and had done quite well in England. Richard the Lionhearted rewarded them. He was captured and held hostage in Austria, and the Jewish merchants helped raise the money to free him. And so he came back and praised them, which made some people very jealous. And in the city of York, we visited this site. And this was the original city with the castle keep on the top of this hill. And this jealousy provoked a pogrom in York. And in 1290. And the Jews retreated to the castle keep, thinking they would be safe. But they were cornered there, and they burned the castle down. It's quite well documented today in the castle keep what happened. And so Cromwell encouraged this idea of Jewish restoration. And this was one of his advisors. And in 1806, at a haystack prayer meeting, things took off here in America. 5 college students got caught in a thunderstorm, and they swore if they escaped that they would do something to spread Christianity to Asia and the Holy Land. And this was the beginning of the Protestant missionary movement. And when I was growing up, we routinely heard reports from the missionaries that our church was sponsoring. So I've experienced this. And this enthusiasm led, one of the factors that led to the Second Great Awakening. And so that's a good place to stop and open it up. Comments, questions? Did I get it mostly right, David?
Yeah, I think that there's a division, right? The Orthodox Jews don't believe in the right of Israel to exist. So the coming together, it's got this weird wraparound from the extreme right and the extreme left, or two ends. But we'll see.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Haredi or Hasidic Jews gather in Israel, of course, to some extent, but not Israel.
Right.
They're waiting for the Messiah to come.
Right. Yeah.
That may be also one reason why they will not participate in the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Huh.
So when you see Haredi Jews occasionally, more in Los Angeles and New York, perhaps in San Francisco, the Bay Area, you'll be able to comment to yourself, they are not Zionists.
That's true.
Interesting. Very good. Well, we'll see what this coming week brings. Maybe I'll get a chance to escape any news stories that must be pursued.
I noticed you were asking for updates as of noon today in this history class.
That's the way it's going.
But I did like your comment or the inclusion in there, the idea that manifest destiny may well include, in many minds, the state of Israel and the gathering of Jews there.
Yeah, if you look at the way they interpret the Bible, it's a spiritual frontier. Okay, folks. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Yeah.